Welcome to the inaugural Unteched podcast, which used to be the Geoflow podcast until we impulsively changed the name. My name is David, and with me, as always, for the second time, is Jordan, as he so aptly pointed out last time. This is our second episode, and we've already changed the name of the podcast. Jordan, why did we change the name?
Because we're terribly impulsive, and we're sick of it. We had a long, modestly successful podcasting career, and we needed to pivot. And
we needed to
episode
pivot
2, and
I needed a break.
We need to move on.
I was burned out. Yeah, I was burned out after one episode, and so we needed to take some time, find myself, find out who I was, who I am as a person.
It's about your
and then
values.
come back stronger. Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So no, we decided Unteched. Unteched. The name comes from a common phrase that we repeat of techifying the unteched. We like to think that we're technologically inclined, but it's probably more likely that just like we're uneducated.
Because we're unteched. Yeah.
We're unteched. We're uneducated. We're unwise. We're impulsive. The name fits on many, many levels, but we have a new logo. It has some colors on it, which we don't usually do colors. So that's a new fun thing. We have a yellow. So we'll see how long that lasts before we impulsively change the color as well.
Episode 3 is how long
episode 3. Yeah. We're on episode 2. We've already changed everything. And episode 3, hold on to your seats, because who knows what's going to happen. Or as you say, hold on to your butts.
Hold on to your butts.
Yep. So today's episode, we're talking about tech stacks. And it's probably fortuitous that we were talking about how impulsive we are as we go into discussing the Geoflow tech stack. And maybe there's some impulsive decisions on the tech stack. Hopefully there are some concrete decisions as well, but the goal is to kind of explain a little bit of the philosophy behind what we chose to build out the Geoflow platform, and kind of give some people some more context to the background there. I guess to start out, do you want to explain a little bit of the philosophy? Obviously you're much more opinionated about the tech stack than I am. Usually you read an X post and you become very opinionated within 10 seconds of whether or not we should use something.
Impulsive.
Break everything, institute a complete rewrite to try a new library. And that's only marginally true, but
I will try my darndest to avoid that
pitfall.
Impulsivity to change everything in one day.
That massive character flaw of yours.
Yeah. I was thinking of these character flaws. We were talking about unteched and all these other things, and the unwanted kept rising to the top for me. Just tell my dad I'm important.
Should we talk about our past and our childhood?
Does my dad know we're doing a podcast? Can somebody tell him?
He'll be so proud.
Oh, he'll be so proud. But yeah, the tech stack, as David very accurately pointed out, is a child of our impulsivity. No, that's not true. But it will be something that does change. Despite all our jokes, this is how it. What we're going to talk about is how it looks today, but it'll likely look very different in 6 months as we continue to evolve. You will have different challenges or different, maybe even capabilities that we want to try going after, and that'll likely change this. So I guess, keep that in mind as we talk about it, that, this is what we're using today, but it very likely could change. And hopefully the reasons it's changing, aren't because we're bored or tech bored, but because they have, some merit or they have some value. But do you want to give the 101, or do you want me to dive right into it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess from the get-go, kind of the philosophy or some of the the foundations of why we choose what we choose or how we choose what we choose. You kind of touched on it. Some of it is we're looking for a developer experience that is pleasant. Like, obviously this is an open source project, so we want contributors, and we want to make contributing to the project as easy as possible. We don't want to confuse people with our choices. There is a level where we want consistency, and there are certain pieces and parts that we want to maintain kind of a static environment so that we're not wildly changing things or breaking things. But there is also a part of wanting to push the envelope. So there's different things that we're holding in tension of creating a developer experience that is really nice for people, creating kind of a foundation that stays consistent, and some things like even just on the front end and on the back end that'll always be kind of true. But then also like forward facing, we talked about in the last episode that part of the goal is being ready for agentic AI and kind of integrating that from the start. So pushing the envelope, and like you've mentioned, some of the AI SDK stuff that we're working with, there's a lot of experimenting going on there. And so those are parts that are very likely to change. So that, kind of keeping that philosophy in perspective as we dive into what we currently have, we're blending some of all of those things together, to as we choose the tech stack. But I don't know if you have anything you want to add to kind of the philosophy side of it.
No, that's such a good segue too, because I guess that's probably almost as important as the tech stack itself as why, kind of like what goes into the decision making of these things. Especially when it's an open source project. I mean, you don't want to write it in the newest flavor of, some front end, I mean, there's so many front end frameworks and stuff, but you write it in solid or something, and there's, what, 1% of the, front end developers that know solid, versus what we chose React, which is the, industry favorite. So
I didn't even know solid existed. So
yeah, I just made it up. I have no idea.
Saw it on X ones.
Yeah. If it doesn't exist, somebody should, because that's a great name.
It's a solid name.
Yeah. So you want, you want tech choices that, can foster, kind of community growth. I mean, again, you want to use popular tech choices that a lot of people are comfortable in, and probably match the, other parts of their stack. If people have other web apps or other, backends, you want it to be fairly agnostic. So that's important. The other one too is you want to be able to develop in technologies that you're comfortable with. I mean, and for us, at the moment, that's what we're comfortable in is, largely TypeScript based projects. So when we talk about this today, you'll notice that TypeScript is a pretty big influence on both the front end and the back end. We preach type safety kind of across the board pretty favorably. So we hold that, I don't know, as much as kind of like a grounding truth as we can in many of like the libraries we pick. Like we'll go away from a library that might make more sense from a performance standpoint, or from, it saves us having to, run some polyfill or something, whatever. But, we'll choose maybe the less, ideal solution in favor of type safety. So it's pretty important to us. But yeah, that's kind of what goes into the kind of like the decision making of why you pick what you want. It's got to work well across industry, and it's got to work well for you. So.
Yep. So with that in mind, do you want to dive in maybe to the back end? We'll get the boring stuff out of the way. Everybody likes the sexy front end, the user interface, UI, UX. That's where the money's made, right? And the back end's the boring stuff that all of us UI designers just want to forget about and pretend doesn't exist. We don't actually need to put data anywhere. We can just ignore that and make fun buttons that don't save anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think the back end is basically optional. Just build everything in the UI and it'll work.
With confetti cannons, we need confetti cannons that
right.
Whenever you do something,
the feel goods. But
yep,
yeah, the back end was an interesting choice because this is an open source project, so you have to be able to distribute this to other users, and they need to be able to host it themselves. So you have to have a choice, or at least in our minds, you have to have some open ability to self-host this, right? So you don't want to use third parties that tie you into their kind of ecosystems, auth providers or hosting providers. You need the ability to take the back end and run it on your local machine, run it in the cloud, or run it wherever you want. So because that's a huge benefit, but it also can be a limitation because, there's third-party services that might make some things easier, auth providers, things like Clerk or WorkOS that, make, authentication brainless, but then that data lives on their servers. And that's, kind of goes against all the principles of what we're trying to do here. So the backend is a little bit different in the sense of this needs to be bundled up and packaged for anybody to just take and run with and not have to go sign up for a third-party service. So that's incredibly important.
Yeah, so I guess that's an important distinction is like somebody that wanted to self-host this, start running with it, they could, take our repo basically. They wouldn't have to sign up for any other services. They wouldn't have to put their credit card in to start paying somebody else, it's free from Geoflow,
Right.
but then you got to go sign up for these 10 services. Like none of that exists here, but they still have things like authentication. They still have all that type of stuff, right? There's, that's a big takeaway, right?
Yeah, no, I mean that's 100% accurate. So you still need many of these things. Like auth is a great example, but we want to be able to run schedules and crons and possibly file storage, and we want to be able to do all of that without third-party services. Again, if you take this repo, you put it on your computer, and I guess at that point you need Docker maybe, but you run one Docker command and you have this whole thing spun up and it's running locally on your machine, 100% on your machine or on your instances. It's not, network requests aren't going out to services and stuff like that. So that is fundamental to the backend. So that works well on your local machine, but it also, when you deploy it to the cloud, same thing.
Yeah. So what I guess then is the back end. We've circled the drain here, but now the big reveal. What are we using for the back end, and why that versus some of the competitors? I'll let you do the reveal, but I have questions.
I love this reveal. Actually, I love because I don't know. So the reveal is convex. Convex says everything.
Confetti cannons.
Confetti. Yeah, the confetti cannons.
We'll put those in post. Yeah. For those watching the video, we'll put those in post. Yeah.
Oh, you can. Oh, boring. I thought it was real. Real guns.
Yeah.
But no, convex is the the main entry point to the backend. So convex is relatively new, so I wouldn't be surprised if most people haven't heard of it, but it's a lot of people maybe are familiar with things like Supabase, where you have a service. We're talking about services here, but Supabase is also self-hostable. Not a lot of people use it that way, but it's kind of like Supabase in the sense that it comes with a database and it comes with file storage and, kind of server edge functions, and it has an API, kind of your HTTP API endpoint, type handlers, all baked into this service. So Convex isn't a database. It isn't a authentication provider. It's actually kind of an entire platform, really. It started as a database, and it's grown out to be a lot more than that because, I don't know, they're not trying to be like the Ruby on Rails for TypeScript or the web necessarily, but it's kind of has a vibe towards that a little bit, where they're like, hey, this is all you're going to need. And we're going to talk about the front end next, but it does a lot for this application right now. And it may not exist in here in 6 months, but for now it's pretty dang cool. But yeah, the reveal, Convex.
Convex for everything from authentication to talking to the database, because it still requires a Postgres database, right? Or that's like the only required part of the backend that people absolutely have to have.
Yeah. So we have Convex as kind of like we said, the main entry point, and it's the main way you use Convex. I mean, most of the time is because it's a database, right? So it's actually not a Postgres database. It's kind of more of it's its own thing, really. But it does use Postgres to write its data into, but it doesn't use the SQL flavor of the Postgres database, though. It basically just uses it as a storage mechanism. Like, hey, like we're doing all this awesome convex databasey things, but we're just going to plop it into a Postgres database because Postgres is really good at just saving things, basically. That's like an elementary way to think about it, but it's kind of how it works, actually. So Postgres is so let me back up just 1 second. So we have Convex, right, as this entry point. And we have a handful of services that we augment that with. So Postgres being one of them as the required ones, but then we also have our worker, we have our Convex dashboard, and we have our MCP server. So those are kind of like ancillary services to our backend that some users may use and some may not use depending on their use case.
And those are optional if you're like, hey, I don't need your MCP server or whatever. I'm just using it
Right.
for this specific use case. You could chop that off, and it wouldn't be a problem. Things would still operate, no problem.
Yep. So yeah, Convex being that required part with the required service of Postgres, but any other component of this, like you said, the MCP server, like if you don't have a chat or an LLM desire for GIS stuff, it's obviously not applicable to you. Don't have to install that. Same with the worker. It's currently it's our place to run long running executions. So think point cloud processing. At the moment, that's the major one. So it manages the jobs and the point cloud executions and PDL and stuff like that. But in the future, it'll be things like image manipulation or image processing, photogrammetric processing, maybe Gaussian splatting, that type of stuff will happen in Worker. So it is optional at the moment, but it'll probably be I would imagine that most people would see it as almost required though.
Yeah, a lot of robust tools will be built into that specifically. So they may find they want it. But front end, the more exciting part, the sexy front end, what people get to see, we're also semi-opinionated on that. There's some things that will likely stay and be foundations and pillars for the future, and some things that we're playing around with. But front end wise, Shad, everybody that's been around the development world for 2 years now. How long has Shad been around before he went corporate and got bought out?
Before he went, guy, so corporate now. I don't know. I think Vercel probably bought Shad. Is it buying
ago?
What's it called? Like an
Acquihire? Yeah.
That's basically what it was. Like it was Shad CN as a library, but Vercel bought it. But it was basically buying the developer of that. Right. I mean, they bought the library too, but all that to say is he's obviously very talented. So they were not wrong buying him in the process.
So we use Shad, and probably like 90% of the Silicon Valley-esque apps that are being built at the moment, everybody's using Shad, but there are obvious benefits to it. Everything from what Better Auth uses Shad components to some of the AI stuff that you're using Shad components. Like give us the quick hit stats on why Shad and why Shad's probably here to stay.
Yeah, this is where we start the Mike Tyson punch out. What's the game where we battle over
Knockout.
UI principles? Yeah. Knockout, yeah. Or no, that's not it.
No.
But the UI
spend the rest of the podcast trying to figure out what that is. Don't Google it.
Yeah. I think Shad CN's largest benefit is you get a tremendous amount of value with like requiring nothing of you. Like that sounds terrible, but like you want to spin up a new component or a button or a card, like it's there and it's so easy to implement. So the level of friction to get UI on the screen is so much different than it was 3 or 4 years ago, where every component, you might have been using like a component library, like some material design type thing or MUI or whatever, something like that, but you were installing a package, and if they didn't have what you wanted, then you were kind of out of luck and you were designing your own, or, you probably designed most of them from scratch anyway. Shad is just, it's so plug and play for almost anything you do. And it's like, that's not where you want to be spending your time or your mental energy, is building UI components. Like it looks great on the screen, but that's not the best use case of your time. So Shad's great for that.
And that's kind of back to our philosophy of like, when people are contributing, our goal is to make the developer experience as easy as possible. So removing kind of that UI barrier, making it easy for people to just take it and run with it is kind of the approach on the UI side. We like it. We think it looks good, but the beauty is the simplicity more than anything.
Yeah, no, for sure. And and even if we back that up, like go a little bit higher level as far as the front end's concerned, I think that's kind of how we view the meta framework we're using as well. So everything we've been talking about, we probably should have said it, but it's probably been implied that this is a React front end. So you can use Shad with other front end libraries, like that one we made up, Solid, things like that. But this
The
is a
fake
React
one.
project.
Yeah.
Yeah, and React it does fit into those design philosophies where, I mean, love it or hate it, React is a large majority of the internet right now. I mean, they actually say that a large majority of the internet is things like PHP and jQuery, but that's just because that's what
The internet was built on.
yeah, it was built on. But everything right now, anything new for the most part is React, and obviously there's other really good front end and far better front end libraries than React, but it's a great equalizer, that's for sure. But we do use Tansec Start as what's called the meta framework. So for those familiar with maybe Next.js or things like that, that's what Tansec Start's kind of closest comparisons to that of like a Next.js, but it's built on what's called Tansec router. So a front end application, most of what a front end application is actually a router. I mean, if unless it's like a single page application, like your classic spa, your router is your front end. It is. It's where you define your routes. It's where all your components live. It's, your authentication, is a lot of times file or route based. So the router is a pretty big part of your meta framework, and Tansec router is amazing because it is entirely type safe. So again, tying into one of those principles of type safety. So
Right.
its con is that it's fairly new, but man, it's got a very passionate following with it right now, and it's awesome. If you haven't
And
used
you're part of that.
Start, yeah, and I'm part of that. I love it.
Yeah.
It is, especially if you come from something like Next.js, it's absolutely amazing. So for other projects we've had where even like the little developer experience benefits are huge, but even just the random things that, I don't know, they matter, but they wouldn't force you to switch. But like our build times for Roastify. So we switched to Tansec Start for Roastify as well. And our build times for most of our apps, I mean, they went down to 20 or 30%. I mean, definitely less than 50% of what they used to be. They were 6-7 minutes, and now they're 1 to 2 minutes. So, I mean, again, it's not the end of the world waiting 4 extra minutes for a build.
Depending on how many deployments you have to do.
Yeah, depending on how many, I mean, for busy days, that definitely adds up. And yeah, it adds up when you're kind of like compounding that in development too, though. Like you're waiting on your TypeScript server, constantly restarting your TypeScript servers, and hot module reloads take forever or don't work at all. Those little things nickel and dime the heck out of you. So Tansec Start, A+. It's awesome.
A+. You get a thumbs up here.
You get a thumbs up, Tanner.
Yep. So that is kind of the meta framework, flows down Shad. I guess the other part, and the part that, just so that we can kind of boost our ratings, and maybe YouTube will like algorithmically push us up the charts. AI. What sort of thing? This is as far as like our order of like things that probably will never change. Shad, 6 months a year, probably never going to change. Convex, it would be a tough change. Maybe it would change, but it's pretty high up there. And then down here, AI likely to change, or that's more where the science is coming in, the bleeding edge is coming in. What are we doing on the AI front?
Yeah, that was perfectly said. That hierarchy of what's stable and what's probably going to change. Yeah. AI SDK v5 is Vercel's like AI solution. It's open source, and it's great. It's actually really, really good. So it's basically the core of how you build a chat app for a lot of people right now, because it's super low friction. You can use AI elements which is a library they just released probably a month or two ago, but kind of gives you the messages and all the UI components for building a chat app is AI elements, and that's kind of baked in with AI SDK. But you get React hooks for sending messages, streaming from the backend, and stuff like that. And we're using their experimental agentic stuff with it. So I think that's probably why it qualifies to what you said of it's probably on the chopping block if it ever is, because it may fall short for what our needs are. We don't know that answer yet, but there are other mature things like lane chain, stuff like that with lane graph that are.
I'm just thinking of your text back and forth, like, what was that 2 weeks ago, where you tried like all three or four different ones, and I'm throwing my computer in the lake,
Oh yeah,
switching between them.
geez.
Yeah,
But that's AI in general though. Like these are,
yeah,
I mean, they lowered the friction to create these things so much, but even doing that, it's still kind of the Wild West a bit, right? Because like nothing necessarily talks to each other all that well. Like Anthropic, they come out with the MCP protocol, and all of a sudden that's the protocol, right? But before that, there was no protocol. So it's like, how do there was tool calling, right? And then there's MCP on top of that.
and
But
now they're
there's a lot
trying
of
to
people.
change that now, aren't they? It's like,
Yeah, right.
passing all the tools at once versus like, the performance of passing 80 tools at one time for every message and filling up your
Right.
context window.
Yep. So, I mean, but just proving the point that this stuff changes very quickly. So when you're trying to kind of like mix and match things, whether it's AI SDK with LangChain or any of these others, you definitely run into bottlenecks, or you run into issues where this one doesn't talk to this one because this one's using the new, whatever that, MCP is using, I don't know. Introduce any example of things changing
The soup of the
constantly.
day for AI. Yeah.
Right, the soup of the day. So that's what AI SDK v5 does really well, is it does standardize the front end and the back end. So it does that extremely well, but with strings attached, at least for now.
Right. So that is one TBD, but kind of where the bleeding edge, I guess, of what we're developing is the ways to kind of use some of that type of stuff, and then the foundation being the parts that hopefully we won't change too much.
Right. Yeah.
The last piece, because again, our call to action right now, we're not selling anything, but we're trying to entice people to try things out and hopefully contribute at some point. Do you have any things just kind of on the developer quality of life side that's interesting? Obviously, you talked about things like TanStack and the quality of life updates there, but just from the development side, how it's deployed or how it's used, that type of thing.
Yeah. And this side probably ensures, I don't know, a little
More
more
subjective.
subjectivity.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so this stuff definitely is.
Well, see, you're
TBD.
opinionated and you're making people better if they don't know about
Right.
these things. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
you.
Well, or it just shines a big fat spotlight on my ignorance too.
Again, it's J Rising J on Twitter, and feel free
No.
to just tell us
No.
how dumb he is.
The joke there too is anytime I sign up for something and I have to add a phone number, hopefully this isn't news to you, because if it is news to you, it's gonna be really funny. I always use David's phone number for everything. So because I know if it was actually really important.
Many spam calls. Thanks
Well, I
to
do
you.
too. But my logic, this logic only works for me. But the logic is, if it was actually something really important, at least it's still going to you and it'll get to me eventually. But for all the other 99% of things that are spammy, then it just goes to you and I don't have to deal with it. So it's real win-win for me.
Yeah, and you changed. Well, it's only fair because in the Flight Evolved days, we used your cell phone for the website and basically everything. And for Roastify, we use your address. So it's only fair.
Yep. People are down to my gate right now knocking, trying to get in. They fell in love with episode 1. They fell in love with Geoflow. And
yep, they're holding signs. They want autographs. That's why you have
the
German
12
Shepherds.
people who listened. Yeah.
Yeah. Your protection dogs and the grizzly bears.
Yeah, exactly. But to the subject of development and build, stuff here. So what we're talking about with this is, how am I running this on my computer? How am I developing on my computer? That type of thing. So, everything's currently broken into a monorepo. So we use Turbo as a kind of our monorepo manager of choice. So Turbo works really well with TypeScript based projects, which is mostly what this is. So it does pretty intelligent caching and does stuff like that. So it does speed things up a bit, but depending on how things move forward, of course, that may change if we have a lot of Python, whatever else. But similar to that, we use Bun as our runtime and package manager, which definitely breaks the mold on the last 10 years of what people have been using with, Node and NPM. And interestingly enough, the background service that we called worker, that actually is Bun entirely. So that actually they added, I don't know, it kind of looks like, if you know what Hano is, it kind of looks like Hano, but they added a Bun, I think it's bun.route, or I don't remember what the method's called, but you can actually scaffold together endpoints and like HTTP endpoints. So that's how we communicate to the worker from Convex, is with Bun running a little web server like that too. So it's, I don't know, pretty dang nice, and it's fast. But again, on that bleeding edge a little bit. So we'll see how that lands later on. But everything is in a Docker container. So we've have a Docker Compose file that can spin everything up. If you want to be lazy, which is probably good in this case, in a lot of ways, be lazy and just, I want to get this up and running, you can run this Docker Compose, and it'll spin up all the services for you. There might be a little, add your little things, your kind of secret keys in here and there type of thing to customize it. But Docker is pretty important. Bun's pretty important. Turbo is pretty important. And then, of course, TypeScript. But those are the main ones from the development side.
Perfect. Which segues probably right into the last piece. Maybe we can give folks some updates on things that have been pushed in the past week. We alluded to a little bit the AI stuff, but maybe we touch on some of the it's all UI related, so it's right up my alley. I mean,
So
it's
very important.
It's the most exciting updates we could do.
Yep. So there's 3 main updates. So they all are UI updates, aren't they, for the most part? Well, kind of. So we'll start with the first one, the schedules node. So we showed that in a video before, but it never actually worked. It's the classic UI that doesn't have any backend to it.
We would never do something like that.
Yeah, no. But the schedules node does work, and that does use the Convex schedules component. So Convex has these things called components, which are basically plugins, and we use that. So, which is, I mean, a pretty amazing component of this application, because you could set a service or one of these workflows to run, let's say, every hour or every day at 8 a.m. or whatever it is. And this happens on the server, so you don't need to have the app open. So, these daily type things, I mean, we've used the example a million times, but, every day at 8 a.m., you check maybe an S3 or an AWS S3 directory, and if there's new files in there, do this processing for them. So maybe that kicks off a point cloud processing type thing, or you check it every 20 minutes, whatever. Obviously, there's a lot of creativity that can be introduced here, but the schedules node is working, and it's, pretty stable as far as, it's running on Convex, and Convex itself is pretty stable. So it's been good so far. Yeah. So the second main update, and this one is all UI. So to your complete joy, the nodes before, so in the canvas, you had a node, and they had an input tab and an output tab, and you click on those, you can see the data for each node. And it was kind of problematic, because when you click on the node, you could see this data, but if you had a lot of data, you're scrolling through it. And it's a huge pain
forever. Yeah.
Yeah. So we transitioned that to a big sheet, a big sheet.
Just a giant sheet. Drink your coffee and open your sheets. Yeah.
Yeah. And wipe them away when you're done. If you're done looking at the data, just wipe that sheet away.
Ooh, are they swipeable? On mobile? Swipe.
Yeah, just flush them right away when you're not using them.
Perfect.
And but yeah, so move that all to a sheet that opens on the side, so it's I don't know, a little better UI to view that. But the third, what was the third, David?
It relates to that, like the pinning data, so you don't have to rerun the entire workflow every single time while you're trying to develop it or deploy it.
Yep. So third update, you can pin data to a node. So let's say you had a series of nodes, maybe that were running a point cloud processing pipeline, maybe your ground classifying a ladder data set. And for development, you want to test out adding another feature to the end of that where you maybe want to thin, but to test out the thinning functionality, you don't want to have to rerun the ground classification every single time to test it out. So you can pin the data and use the data that's pinned instead of rerunning the whole node. So I would say it's a quality of life a lot for development and testing. It does have use cases in production that you might want to pin data for if it's, something that's really heavy and expensive to run, but it doesn't change ever. That would be an example of why you might want to pin data. But for development and testing, when you want to, add or refine a workflow and not rerun 2 hours of a process or even 5 minutes of a process just to test new nodes, you can pin the data, run it with the pin data that's, part of that node. And yeah, pretty simple, but pretty helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all about the quality of life updates and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
sheets. Yeah.
Yep. And the sheets.
Sheets.
Speaking of sheets.
Speaking of sheets, we should wrap this up. What do you got? What do you got on the development roadmap for this week, the upcoming weeks? What do we What do we
Yeah.
have to tempt the people with?
Oh yeah. Well, I think most of my time the last couple of days have been working in the S3 node. Basically, you could get basically a list of your files and stuff like that. But a big part of connecting to a cloud data directory of some sort, whether it's like an Azure or an S3 or an R2, like Cloudflare R2, is downloading the data and then re-uploading when you're done. So added 2 more operations to the S3 node, which will translate to anything that runs the S3 SDK. So think things like Cloudflare R2, will benefit similarly, but you can download data, you can run whatever workflows you want to run, and then you can upload data back to a bucket. So that is in a working state now. It has some rough edges to it that we'll get to here for this week, but yeah, S3 stuff, that's the big one right now. I feel like that's a pretty core part of people's workflows and requirements though.
Awesome. Well, hopefully that gives people a little bit of background on the tech stack that we're using. Some of it opinionated, some of it potentially subject to change. The code base still isn't quite live yet for people to start playing with, but it will be soon. And in the meantime, everybody can just direct their outrage and their comments to Jordan on Twitter again. Or we also you can sign up for our Discord. That's probably the best place to interact with us. And you
Yep.
can also direct your outrage at Jordan on our Discord channel. So we hope you enjoyed this episode, the inaugural episode of the Untech podcast, which formerly known as the Geoflow podcast. And we will catch you on the next one.
Well, see you later.